In the last two lessons we looked at two methods for the manufacture of industrial ethanol. One of them was through the reaction of ethene with steam, and in the other we looked at the process of fermentation. Now during these lessons I mentioned various advantages and disadvantages of each process, and in this lesson I'd like to summarize these by making a comparison. Questions comparing these methods often comes up in the GCSE exam, so it's important to have a closer look at that. Now you'll see on this diagram what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the advantages of each in green and the disadvantages in red. First of all, with regard to rate of reaction, well, we can say that fermentation is clearly a very slow process. It takes a long time for the raw material to be changed from glucose into ethanol, so we've got a very slow rate. Whereas in the case of ethene and steam, well, that's a very fast reaction. Now with regard to ethene and steam, the quality of the product that is produced is pure and you get 100% ethanol. Whereas in the case of fermentation, well, you would get a mixture of ethanol and water. So you have a much lower concentration of ethanol and there will be other substances mixed in with it. So the product is impure with a low concentration of ethanol. Now the raw material used in fermentation are sugars or glucose, and sugars are renewable resources. All you've got to do is grow the raw material, so that's an advantage. Whereas in the case of ethene and steam, well, ethene is a product of the fractional distillation of crude oil, which means that ethene comes from a non-renewable source, which is going to eventually run out. So that's a disadvantage. Now, from the point of view of the process involved, we have a continuous process. The plant is constantly in operation, it's not turned off at all, and that process is running at high pressure and at high temperatures, so that means quite high costs to keep the operation running. So we put continual in red because it's a disadvantage from the point of view of running costs, whereas in the case of fermentation, that can be run as a batch process. You can turn it on and off as you please, and it's running at lower temperatures. So that's running at 30 degrees Celsius. This one was running at 300 degrees Celsius and up to 80 atmospheres. Okay, so you've got much higher costs in running this process than you have in the case of fermentation. However, also in the case of the ethene steam production, you have extremely expensive equipment, whereas in the case of fermentation we have cheaper equipment. Now with regard to the labour costs, well, fermentation gives a poor showing. The whole process involves employing people to grow the raw material, to cultivate it, to harvest it, to transport it, to ferment it, and all this takes place over a long period of time. So really you've got long periods of time where ethanol isn't actually being produced at all, and so we have quite high labour costs, whereas in the case of the ethene and steam production of ethanol, you've got fewer people employed, and while they're being employed, ethanol is being produced constantly, so we have lower labour costs.